In the Gun, episode number 82. It's time for a Duquesne Preview. The Duquesne Dukes on the docket at home, the home opener for your Mountaineers this weekend. We're going to get into all of that, as always, as we've got another game preview episode of ITG for you here. It is In the Gun, your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wesley Euler with the best teammates in the business, the signal caller, Jed Drenning, and the runaway beer truck, Owen Schmidt, down the sideline. Quick little disclaimer here. Jed is in a hotel room, and right now his internet's good, and he looks clear, and he's trying to mess with me and look pixelated. But if he gets a little wonky for a few seconds at some point, our apologies. It's that internet in the hotels. It's hit or miss. But we obviously wanted to get this Duquesne preview done for you all. In this episode of ITG, as always, brought to you in part by our friends at BetOnline, your number one source for all of your betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for football, baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live bets and all your favorite casino and card games available to play right on your phone. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Use the promo code BELIEVE when you sign up for a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV at BetOnline, where the game starts. Before we get into that Mountaineers home opener, gentlemen, a headline, as always, to get us going here. And this was an interesting one. Caleb Williams, of course, reigning Heisman Trophy winner, quarterback of USC, thought of as, maybe Drake May in the conversation as well, too, but one of those very short list of guys right now who's thought to have a really good chance to be the number one overall draft pick in the upcoming, what will be the 2024 NFL draft in April. And his father making a little bit of noise here this week when he said that it's not a lock that his son is going to declare for the draft after this season. Caleb Williams would still have one more year of eligibility. Now, everybody tends to assume you're going to be the first overall pick, maybe at worst second or third, something like that. You're definitely going to go to the pros. But two factors here, gentlemen. The first, his father saying that, they don't want him to go to a bad situation, basically. That, the way that the system is constructed, you go to the worst possible team, to the worst organization in the league because of a desire for parity, right? And so that's the gift and the curse, basically, is what his father was saying. And, saying that he's poised to make over $3 million in NIL money this year. So there's not the financial rush for him to jump to the NFL. He's already making decent money with the NIL. And that, we've seen this before, that John Elway, forcing his way out of a situation he didn't want to be in and ended up on the Denver Broncos. Eli Manning saying he would refuse to play for the San Diego Chargers at the time, now the LA Chargers, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I just, guys, we've talked a lot about the ripple effects of NIL, and this might actually be one that's, you could certainly say is good for college football. If you've got guys who don't feel like they have to rush to the NFL to chase that money. If, hey, the situation, the timing is not right for me, and I can continue to make some money and support my family staying here in school, hey, that's probably not going to make all the NFL scouts and talent evaluators and the billionaire suits happy. But I think it certainly is one of those NIL wrinkles that will have a big effect here on college football.
I don't understand the declaration part of it. In other words, if you're an underclassman, you're supposed to declare or announce for the NFL draft within 7 days following the national championship. So is he saying he won't make a declaration? Is that what he's saying? Because is somebody going to draft him if he hasn't declared? Or that's the part I can't figure out. I mean, I get what he's saying. He'd like to have the best of both worlds. And, making $3 million a year in NIL, unlike in a past life when players couldn't do that, what's the rush to get out? But at the same time, following the structure and the timelines that are set up leading up to the NFL offseason, up to the draft, 7 days after the college national championship, you're supposed to declare as an underclassman. Is he going to declare or is he not going to declare? I mean, it's not like all the teams. Let's say you're some team like the Cardinals that maybe he doesn't want to play for. He doesn't like the organizational structure of Arizona. It's not like the Cardinals are going to come out and tell him the week of the national championship game, hey, buddy, better not declare because, yep, we're taking you.
So yeah, we're taking you first overall, right?
I don't. That's the disconnect for me. I don't understand that part of it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Go ahead, Big O.
No, that's strange, and quite honestly, hey man, It's the NFL, dog. All right. Just, if you don't want to go, don't go. But you don't really have a choice. I mean, whoever's going to pick you is going to pick you. That's probably going to really deter some teams from picking you, honestly. Maybe that's why he's coming out with it like that. Who knows? I don't know. That's
his choice. You're exactly right, Owen, because you
don't have a choice.
I mean, I was 13 in 1983 when John Elway did this, but I was old enough to remember it seemed very much without precedent. And wait a minute, how can you do this? The Colts are drafting you. Go to the Colts. That's how this works. Well, he was John Elway. And now history tells us he was John Elway. So you have to have a certain cachet to do that. And now I would argue Caleb Williams might in fact have that. He's that type of player, or at least appears to have that potential type of talent and potential. But Eli, same type of thing. That was more like Archie getting involved, and they wanted a big market situation from, to cash in on marketing opportunities, and San Diego wasn't viewed that way. Yeah, similar but different situations. But this one, you're right, Owen. Maybe what he's doing is lining this up to deter certain teams from drafting him. Is he going to be in the draft pool or isn't he? That's the question. You either forego the draft or you don't. In other words, a week after the national championship, he's either returning to college. You see what I mean? Or he's not going to the NFL, one or the other. That's the part that is unique here. But maybe what this does, it precipitates change on the college front, where they relax some of those rules in terms of you have to, in a very tough fashion, declare one way or the other definitively. And maybe some of that will be loosened up moving forward in the years to come. But there has to be some level of structure to it, because you can't just have the Wild West where everybody declares for the draft, and then half the players or prospects don't like where they're drafted. And now the NFL sitting there, and they drafted 8 guys or 7 guys, and only 3 of them are coming to camp. You can't have that either, and the NFL won't.
Well, no, I don't. Yeah, I don't think that would be possible.
Does this go? Where does this go? Is he in the draft pool or isn't he?
Right. They're not going to let him do the NBA thing, right? Where you can declare for the draft, but as long as you don't hire an agent, you can go back to school. I don't see the NFL ever.
I mean, without changing some rules on that front.
The second you declare, your college eligibility is gone.
It's nice to say, hey, I don't have to go to the NFL draft. I have $3 million waiting on me at USC for another year. But you got 7 days to say that after the national championship. It's not like you can declare and then 3 weeks before the NFL draft in April, the end of April, beginning of May, say, I don't like the way this is sounding, the way this is looking, I'm coming back. You can't do that unless the NCAA changes a bunch of rules. So that's the part we have to figure out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And you know what, guys? Maybe this is the cynic in me, but I also, as we're talking this all out, maybe it's just a power move by Caleb Williams and his father to try and get more NIL money from USC and their boosters and their trust. It can simply be that as well too. We know how negotiations work. Sometimes people bluff. Sometimes people say things that they don't mean just to see how some people are going to react. Maybe it's just as simple as, hey, we go out here and shake some of these feathers. Maybe we can get you an extra $1 million or $2 from some USC boosters.
Ransom style. If you ever want to see me worth 13 as a Trojan again, you have 7 days to comply with my demand.
That's right. And I want $500,000 in 50s. I want $500,000 in 20s. I want $500,000 in 10s. But certainly
$1 million.
Another branch of this tree that is this brand new NIL quirk in college football, and how it continues to change and evolve and all these things. Something that we will obviously keep an eye on here. We're going to take a break. When we come back on the other side.
Hang on, Wes. Before we take the break, real quick, I want to get this trivia knocked out before we get into the preview, because this is a WVU scheduling trivia question. Let me ask you guys. And Skylar, it might be cool if you could, even on the YouTube side, pop up the schedule on the screen so people can consider before they answer. Here's the question. Which games on West Virginia's schedule this year have or will pit 2 Orange Bowl champions against each other? And what I mean by that is this. West Virginia is a former Orange Bowl champion. We won the Orange Bowl, okay? Penn State won the Orange Bowl. So last week was a matchup between 2 former Orange Bowl champions. we have 2 more of those games remaining on the schedule. So there's 3 total. Out of 12 games, 3 of West Virginia's games on the schedule are matchups between 2 former Orange Bowl champions. One was Penn State last week, 2 more to come. Who are the 2 more to come this year on West Virginia's schedule? In other words, who do we face that, like us, has won an Orange Bowl? There's only 2 left.
Big O, you guess first.
Oh God, are you looking it up?
I'm not. I swear, I'm not looking. I'll put my hands here. I'm not looking. I just pulled up our. I swear, I pulled up our schedule real quick just to make sure I had all the teams in front of me. I swear.
Orange Bowl. Maybe the Sooners.
Bing, bing. That's 1. Good job.
That was going to be one of my guesses.
Bing, bing. There's 1. So out of 3 games, we've already played one against Penn State, who won the Orange Bowl. We will play Oklahoma later in the season.
I got this. You got another guess, Big O, or you want me to go?
You got it. Let's see if you got it.
BYU.
That's incorrect, sir.
Cincinnati.
Is that your final answer?
All right, easy Regis Philbin. I mean, Big O, I don't know. I'm trying to think. Like, I feel like Cincinnati.
Orange Bowl. I mean, that's a pretty
it's not. It's no. I was gonna say it's not Pitt. It's not Pitt.
Not Pitt. No, come on.
Wait, is it Duquesne? Is it Duquesne?
It is Duquesne. The 1937 Orange Bowl champion Duquesne Dukes with a 13-12 victory over Mississippi State. Yes, it's Duquesne. Yes, very well played.
When you think about the blue bloods of college football, right behind Oklahoma is Duquesne. So that makes it, you know.
That's right.
Oh, and here you and I are trying to like really think about this, and we should have known with the Duquesne preview that Jed. You know, that's a classic Jed move there.
Perfect segue, Wes. Now take your break.
Now we got to get the break because we're all embarrassed here. We got to let Jed dunk on us when we go to commercial. But when we come back, you sneaky snake, you. We'll talk about those Duquesne Dukes on the other side. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less. In Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
For more West Virginia Mountaineer football content, be sure to follow us on Twitter at In the Gun Podcast.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Let's go, Mountaineer fans. You're tuned in to In the Gun with Wes, the Runaway Beer Truck, and the Signal Caller.
Back in the gun here. It is time now to take a deep dive at the upcoming matchup, the home opener against the Duquesne Dukes. Yes, Pittsburgh's foremost athletic program coming down to collegiate athletic program coming down to Morgantown before some other, I don't know, Panthers or something, some brawl out in the backyard, I've been told, is the following week. I don't know, but this is the granddaddy with the Dukes coming to town. 6 p.m. Saturday night is the kickoff. And Jed, here's where I want to go to you to start this. This is a football game. This is 60 minutes. This is where crazy things have happened and teams can lose games like this. But we also know, I mean, there's a reason why it's at least I looked earlier today. I couldn't find a spread on this game, no over-unders, none of that stuff, because it's one of those that they kind of take off the board because they view it as so lopsided. You know, the ESPN predictor says that WVU wins this game 99.8% of the time, you know, or something like that. So when you're doing a game preview that is, you know, on paper as lopsided as this one, where do you begin?
Look at it like this. Like, let's drop the pretense, and we should win this football game going away. All right. We should win this football game going away, but there's a lot of things we have to demonstrate and show and confine it ourselves along the way. I always remind people the team in 2011 that won the Orange Bowl, the Geno, Stedman, Tavon team, was losing 12-10 to Norfolk State at halftime.
They were.
I always remind people of that. So take care of your business. Don't put yourself in that kind of situation. Have to claw your way out in the second half, as that team did. So when you look at Neal's history, for instance, against FCS opponents, because this is an FCS opponent, former 1AA, we have faced 4 with Neal as the head coach. Towson 65-7 in 2022, Long Island 66-0 in 2021, Eastern Kentucky 56-10, the COVID year, that crazy empty stadium season opener. And then the JMU game, different animal. They were a really good FCS team about to move up. We were in a transition. We weren't a very good football team at all in so many ways. But the 20-13 dogfight in that one. Even you go back to Troy. As a head coach, Neal faced 4 FCS teams at Troy, which is a G5 school, right? He beat Florida A&M 59-7, Alabama State 34-7, Austin Peay 57-17, and Charleston Southern 44-16. This should not be a competitive game, okay? You don't want to make it a competitive game. One of the goals is don't make it a competitive game for the half. So you want to get a lot of reps. You want to solve a lot of issues. You want to work out kinks. You want to get as many bodies on the field as you can. We'll talk about the things that Duquesne can do to get creative and not let you put the game away as easily as you want to. We'll get into that. But when you look at it big picture, let's do that, and then work our way down. You don't want this to be a game. If it is a game well into the second half, you got very obvious problems. And heretofore, it hasn't been against one of these teams, but they're not just going to show up and do their part. I mean, they're still scholarship football players. They still put pads and helmets on, right, Owen? I mean, they're still going to want to hit and tackle. This is the biggest game that they'll play this year. So it's going to matter to them. So they're not just going to roll over and do their part. So you have to show up and make sure you do your part. I mean, Owen, you played in some of these games, right? So give us your perspective and what that was like from a preparation standpoint. You got to stay crisp. You got to stay focused. That's not always easy. But right now, we should be coming out pissed off, hungry for our first win, whether it's against Duquesne or what Duquesne was formerly called in 1878, the Pittsburgh Catholic College of the Holy Ghost. So no matter who you're playing, you got to take care of your business, right, Owen?
Yeah, I remember playing Eastern Washington, and you got to remember, this is kind of like, this is their championship game, so to speak. You know, this is their Super Bowl of big teams they're able to play in. They have everything to gain and we have everything to lose. So, you know, to your point, you got to come out crisp. We have mistakes that we made last week that we have to correct. There's things that we need to try to show. We need to be able to throw the ball downfield and stretch the field. We need to shore up those procedural penalties, mistakes. There's, you know, obviously we know we could probably just, you know, run ISO the whole game down the middle and it is going to be what it is. That's our strength of our team. But I'd like us to see at least try some different things with what we can do. You know, I was even kind of throwing it around with some friends I was talking with earlier. You know, it'd be cool if we are doing well in the game, split time, you know, have Garrett have his first half, and then maybe Nico the second half, just to get him some PT for development anyways, but just to kind of see what he can do as well. But you got to come out sharp, and you can't snooze on it because you'll get beat. You'll get beat. And these teams, I'm telling you, this is their chance to come and play big time football in front of a big time crowd. So you can't look by them.
Wes, it bothers me. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to add to Owen's point too, like of this opportunity for these guys, 2 years ago they played at TCU. Last year they played Florida State and Hawaii as well.
Yep.
So I mean, Hawaii not on the same level as Florida State and TCU, but still a D1 program. I mean, those guys that are on this roster will have some experience running out into big stadiums against Power 5 opponents in a game where they're supposed to lose by 30, 40 points. So they won't be overwhelmed by that moment, at least. Now, they didn't fare well in any of those games. I mean, they kept it relatively competitive with Hawaii, but TCU and Florida State blew them out. But that's an interesting wrinkle too, Jed, because like you mentioned Towson, you mentioned Long Island. Those teams weren't playing Florida State and TCU as well coming into Morgantown. So they'll be ready for the moment.
And there's other kids populating the roster, and there always are with these FCS teams. They have an SEC transfer at running back. So you don't think he's running out in front of some big crowds in his career so far? But it troubles me when people look at a game like this and say you can get nothing out of it. Look, anytime you step on the field in a competitive environment with pads on, if you know the game of football, you can watch the two teams playing and get something out of it. You can extract something anytime there's a competitive game. I don't care how overmatched one team might be or appear to be. Like we talked about this early last season. I mean, Kansas came out and took care of business against Tennessee Tech 56-10. Nobody was paying much attention to that. We were, because Kansas looked like they were doing what you should do against that type of team, whereas
which they don't
never
do.
Done that before. Yeah, you weren't used to seeing it. So you can tell something every series, to some extent every rep, irrespective of who the competition is. There's something you can tell across the board with 11-on-11 football when you know what to look for. Now, is it going to make you this battle-tested team that's ready to, wage war in the fourth quarter against some of these better teams on our schedule? That's not what this is about. But everything is a test. Can you be crisp? Can you be focused in a week that the world's telling you you don't need to be? And it says a lot about you if you can show up and be incredibly focused, incredibly crisp against an opponent that, for all intents and purposes, seems like you can get away with not being any of those things. Can you be? Because if you are, that's the mark of a good football team. We talked about last week at Penn State. This was a relatively clean effort. Clean in the sense that there were no turnovers on the offensive side. We only had 5 total penalties. Can you have another clean effort? Can you have another clean effort against a overmatched opponent that's not just going to show up and roll over? They want to stay in this game as long as they can to make life difficult. Our goal is to not let them do that. And ultimately, you want the day ending with the kind of script Owen just talked about. You want Nico playing a lot, Garrett playing. You want these freshmen that are going to have to help us at some point, logging more valuable reps in a competitive environment. Again, it drives me crazy when somebody says, oh, you can't tell anything about some team beating another team 82-6. Well, then you don't know football well enough. You don't know football. You don't know what to look for. There are some things you can tell from every game. Now, there are far more things you can tell from other games, and that's kind of the approach that I look at this. And again, we'll get into the matchups offensively, defensively, the things we need to look for even from a special team standpoint. But the larger test is this. Don't be in this circumstance against this opponent. I'll never forget what Dana told that 2011 team in the locker room. I'll never forget this. This is when I recognized Dana doesn't talk like most other coaches. I came up around Rich, right? This level of intensity that was second to none. I was in there for Stu. I mean, I was around Rick Trickett. These are the head coaches that I was around, okay? And these are the messages to teams that I heard in the locker room before we went on the field. And this was Dana's third game in Morgantown. So we were still kind of getting to know each other. And he told the team before we went on the field, it wasn't this rah-rah Newt Rockney win one for the Gipper thing. No, he's like, these guys aren't that good. You're way better than them. We got more scholarships. We're faster. We're bigger. We're stronger. We're way better than them. He said, now, if you go out there and screw around and lay an egg and act like you don't have to show up and play, you're going to find yourself in a dogfight. If you go out and take care of business, we'll blow them out and we'll sub the whole second half and have fun. He said, but if not, you're going to be in a dogfight against a team you shouldn't be in a dogfight because you're way better than them. And what happens? We play, we lay an egg in the first half. It's 12-10 at halftime. He literally broke up in a Gatorade, looked at those guys and said, I told you, here's your dogfight. Here's your dogfight. You made your bed. Now get out. You're better than them, but you sure didn't look like in the first half. You're going to look like in the second half. Well, in the second half, trailing 12-10, we outscored them 45-0 to win 55-12. But his point was well taken. You're better than them, but it doesn't matter if you're better than them if you show up and don't execute like Owen's talking about.
Yep, absolutely. Funny aside for you, 5 years in Morgantown for me, that was the one game I missed as a student was that game, because I got invited to sit in a suite at the big house for the Michigan Notre Dame game, college game day, all that stuff. And I was like, yeah, all right, I got to go. And then I'm sitting there tailgating in Ann Arbor, like looking at my phone, like, son of a, what are we doing? What the hell is going on here? It's my fault because this is the one game I'm missing in my 5 years as a student.
It is your fault.
But yeah, fortunately they took care of business and I didn't have to sweat that one out very much. All right, Jed, matchups then, right? Well, quickly, thank you to our friends at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. They're doing great stuff for our student athletes and NIL. I don't know. I heard they might even have Caleb Williams calling them up for some favors here soon. So make sure you're getting your butts on down to Grafton and support those who support our Mountaineers. Taj Butts is his name there, Jed. I mean, that's just a great football name. The running back for Duquesne, who was at Missouri. Jed mentioned SEC kid. Taj Butts is his name. Jed, 104 yards on just 9 carries in Duquesne's week 1 win. So, all right, how do you bottle this guy up and not let him get going and not let them get any momentum established?
Yeah, he's a kid. Explosive, has a burst, very compact, 5'10", 210 pounds. Pretty shifty kid, Owen, runs with some lower body strength. You're going to have to bring him down. I mean, they got another kid in Jamario Clements. And Clements is a kid that, another 5'10", 2 Bills kid. So they have some physicality to them and some punch in their run game. So you're going to have to control your gaps. You're going to have to find a way to get some penetration. The guy pulling the trigger, when you look on the perimeter, Darius Parentes. Now, what's interesting about this guy, he's a Rhode Island transfer, but he's been there a handful of years. In 2021, he's been a backup for the better part of the last couple of years, but their starter was dinged up on and off, so he got to play quite a bit, but he's the man coming into the season, Parentes. And 2 years ago, he made his first start with Duquesne against Ohio U, the Bobcats. And all they did in that game was go on the road to Athens, and it was the first time in the history of the program they knocked off an FBS school. They beat them 28-26 his first start. So just imagine, and that's kind of their Sugar Bowl win over Georgia. This guy started, his first career start was in that game. They won that game in that environment. So he's been pulling the trigger and making plays for them off and on for a long time. So he's a guy that understands the big picture, what they're trying to do offensively. Now, when you look at him, he's a thick kid that you really got to secure in the pocket. I mean, one of these plays that he made against Edinburgh last week, it looked like backyard football. It really did. It was they had a corner blitz from the boundary, and the corner had him dead to rights, and he kind of just ducked and shook him off. And then he just extends the play and breaks out. He throws a 40-yard touchdown. And I just had to watch the body language of that corner. Like, are you kidding me? How did I let that happen? But so you have to bring him down. You have to secure the tackle. He has some size to him as well. He's a thick 220, a compact 6-foot kind of guy. But he's played a lot of football. He's seen a lot of things. And their offensive coordinator, you kind of get the sense this guy is first of all, he's been there on that staff for 12 years. And he's been in this role coaching the quarterbacks and serving as coordinator since 2016. Anthony Doria, former player, very successful quarterback at that level himself. I think he has a good relationship from a play caller to quarterback when you look at him and Parentes. So you're going to secure the tackle. Don't let this kid escape and extend plays. If you do that, if you let him extend plays and he shakes loose from a pressure package, now all you're doing is what's the concern of our unit defensively? The back end. We're still trying to find ourselves on the back end. We gave up all these big plays last week. That was a shortcoming of ours a year ago. We're trying to find ourselves in the secondary. Well, the last thing you want to do is let this guy extend a play for another 3 or 4 seconds and add that much more stress on our secondary, which has already struggled. So don't let that happen. On the perimeter, another transfer. That's a recurring theme, not just in college football in general, but more specifically with teams at this level. You see a lot of it. There's a wideout named DJ Powell, number 4. He's a Bethune-Cookman transfer. He's 6'3", pushing 2 bills, probably in the low 190s, but plays a pretty physical brand of football when there's a 50-50 ball in the air. I mean, he's made multiple plays. I see there's a great level of trust Parentes has with this kid. He will put it up and give him a jump ball. And just as often or more often than not, that kid wins those jump balls. But that's something to definitely keep an eye on. So when you look at the tests that are going to present themselves for West Virginia, I think one of the things you have to look at is, again, Lee Koba played lights out football last week, no matter how you stack it. I mean, we always talk about when it comes to the metrics and these websites, we all have this love-hate relationship with Pro Football Focus, for instance. I mean, sometimes I have like a 40 snap rule with Pro Football Focus, because when you look at the wide array of guys that they have grading that tape, sometimes the evaluation that you're looking at does not match what you're studying on the game tape. It doesn't at all. Guess who the highest graded tackling team all of last year in the Big 12 was by Pro Football Focus? Guess who it was?
WVU.
West Virginia. PFF had us as the best tackling team in the Big 12. So if all you're going to do is read stats off PFF's website without corroborating that with some film study, which I do, that's where my 40 snap rule comes in. In other words, if PFF gives me a stat, and they're good for a lot of good stuff, they are, I'll give them credit. I want to evaluate and get the sense of, all right, the guy that was grading this to attach that number to it knew what he was doing. Okay. And that's kind of what I was looking at with Lee Koba last week. But they have a stat at Pro Football Focus, and it's called stop, not just a tackle, but a stop. And they define that as a tackle that constitutes a failure for the offense. So we all know that Lee Koba had 13 total tackles last week, and it was a nice blend that appeals to me. Seven solo tackles, 6 assisted. And the 6 is kind of, I always say that the dog chasing the bone. He wants a piece of that meat. He's flying after the pile. He wants a piece of it. So he had 13 total tackles. But maybe even more impressively, when you look at that stop, that failure by the offense, he had a Big 12 best 8 stops, more than any other Big 12 defender in week 1 action. And some of those Big 12 defenders were not playing Penn State. We know that. Yeah. So great football by Lee Koba. Let's see if he can take the next step and just absolutely dominate a lesser opponent this week, because he needs to, and we need him to. If we want to put these guys away and get the reps that we're talking about getting with so many bodies and hockey substitutions, guys like Lee Koba have to take care of business early. And then we had 9 hurries and 7 quarterback hits against an incredibly talented Penn State offensive line and an incredibly talented quarterback in Drew Aller. I mean, some of the things Drew Aller was doing when we almost sacked him, those quick delivery throws, those quick answer throws, he looked like a guy when I was studying that film that has played in this offense a whole heck of a lot more longer than one start and spot play last year. He was very top of where his quick answer throws were. But those are the types of things that defensively I think we need to take a look at. And just as importantly than that, when you look at snap counts, okay, that's one of the things that kind of tells the tale of how a game is unfolding. Let's talk D-line, Owen, and I want you to jump in here first. Sean Martin led the charge with 54 snaps against Penn State. Okay, I'm going to go through quickly, and here's how things went out. Eddie V had 48. Big Mike Lockhart had 44. Fatorma Moba, the Penn State transfer, pitched in with 15. D. Hawkins, a dozen. Tomey, young guy from Kentucky, he made some plays for us in just 8 snaps. Now, Hammond Russell, didn't it feel like Hammond Russell was somewhat of an impact player in that game? He had 5 snaps. You think it's going to be limited to 5 moving forward? I don't think so. And then Jalen Thornton with 4. So, Owen, first, before we go further to the back end, the second and third levels, what do you think about that snap count mix and what we need to do to take care of our business against Duquesne defensively?
Well, obviously the kind of the first group got heavy reps, right? We got a lot of reps for the heavy for the first team. You know, versus Duquesne, you know, probably the game plan is, hey, depending on what we're doing with the score, get those guys in and out, play those 2s, get them some reps, kind of get them to see, gets a little bit more action. Some of those guys who kind of outshined in the lesser reps probably get a little more playing time this week. And to their hat, well deserved, right? I mean, you got to take those opportunities and make the best of them. And sometimes they're few and far between. You only get a couple reps here and there. So hopefully up front, you know, obviously we got to get some pressure on this guy. He's a big quarterback, 220, right? get some pressure on this guy, make a move, see how we can work within the offensive line and make sure that we're, playing sound up front, playing tough, getting the penetration that we need to stop the pass game and stuff in the run when they do run the ball. So hopefully some of those second team guys get some reps in there. We can kind of see what they can do as far as moving on for the rest of the season. And hopefully they can help out the best they can and we see good things.
And Wes, also, one of the things to consider, we're going to want to do this. You want to take care of business. You want to knock them out early. You want to rep a lot of kids, but you also want to do it being somewhat vanilla. In other words, you're not going to see a lot of exotic twists. We don't want to show them to Pitt if we haven't shown them.
You ain't run any trick plays this week against Duquesne.
Right. Yeah. Unless you don't have any intention of running the movie forward, right?
Right.
But
right.
So we talked
this
about
is base defense stuff, Jed.
What's that? Base defense. Yeah, that's right. And we talked about in camp, D-line rotation of potentially 8-9 bodies, right? That's what we were looking at. So I just named 8 guys that got snaps. Now, I think the goal would be when you look at the bottom half of those snaps, Jalen Thornton, 4, Hammond Russell, 5, Tomey, 8, D. Hawkins, 12, even Fatorma with 15, they'll need to start climbing to even that out a little bit. And then you have a Sonny Redwood coming back soon. So don't look now, but that's now 9 guys that will be sharing that burden and sharing those reps. So that's something to monitor. And I do think that we need to distribute that pretty evenly in a game like this. Now, when you go to the second and third level, let's look at the backers and the DBs. Trey Lathan, 61 snaps, led all defenders. And I think we're all incredibly pleased with what we saw out of Trey Lathan at Mike Backer, by the way. So when we cross-train those guys, it puts you in position. He can play Will, he can play Mike, he can move him around. Beanie Bishop, 60 snaps. Now, again, if I'm excited about anything I saw out of any of our corners or even anybody on the back end for that matter, it would have been Beanie the other night. He left a couple turnovers on the table. He's got to make the most of those for sure because we got to start stealing possessions. But that being said, I think he held his own against a very high-quality offense. Let's see if he can take the next step. And can he dominate this week and then set the table for what he's ready to do moving forward against Pitt and on down the line? Lee Coble with 58 snaps. We talked about Lee. My guy, Anthony Wilson, 53 snaps. I think it was a tremendous opportunity when Marcus Floyd didn't make the trip. He was a scratch because of the injury. Anthony Wilson stepped right in and did, for the most part, what we expected him to do. With 53 defensive snaps, there's a physical edge to him, a nastiness. His disposition is one we need on that back end. Andrew Wilson-Lamp, he was forced into duty for a reason I'll get into here in a second. I don't think they intended for him to get 46 snaps, but that's how it unfolded. He didn't end up with 46. Keyshawn Cobb, another safety, another transfer that we're very high on, 43 snaps, jumped right into the mix. Aubrey Burks, 40 snaps. Jared Bartlett, 49. Lance Dixon, again, he's playing that spear, but you're also moving him around a bit, 34 snaps. Tyron Bradley, here's a guy we haven't talked much about. Different body type. When you put him in that spot and you can say, all right, attack a tackle or drop into space and cover the pass, 6'3", 250 pounds, that's a nice asset. And he had 25 snaps. So that was a nice start for him. And then finally, Montre Miller, who was standing next to me in street clothes the entire second half, he got knocked out of the game in the second quarter. So he ended up only logging 12 snaps, which is part of the reason AWL had 46. So I expect once we get healthy, that to kind of equalize a little bit. But these are the types of things we got to look at, guys. When you're distributing those snap counts, that's where experience comes. Those are actual reps and actual action in actual competitive environments. I don't care who you're playing against. That's a great experience for you. So what can we do defensively to take care of business early enough, execute the plan, ideally from base sets, and then get a lot of faces coming in, coming out?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the blueprint. I think, some of those names that you mentioned there, Jed, from some of the guys who, didn't have their strongest performance at Beaver Stadium out there in Happy Valley. I think I'd like to see a big bounce back from those guys as well, too. Wilson Lamp, Aubrey Burks, guys who would have wanted some of those plays back. Even a Beanie Bishop, who I thought played a pretty solid game, but like you mentioned, had an opportunity at a couple turnovers. Maybe some guys along that offensive line as well, too. Garrett Green, and again, there's different varying. I'm not saying any of those guys were a disaster or terrible or anything like that, but would probably agree that they didn't have their best game or the game that they wanted to. Like you mentioned, go out there, first couple series, execute. If you're on defense at 3 and outs, okay, maybe they pick up a first down here, but, no more than 6 or 7 plays and you're off the field. Offense, string drives together, maybe an explosive touchdown, right? Let's see a 60 or 70-yard touchdown, something like that. Then let's see a nice 5, 6, 7, 8 play drive, something in that regard. Just something to get those guys feeling good in stadium once again as well, too. After a very tough test up there in Penn State. A thank you to our friends at Fortis for presenting this episode of ITG as well, too, for roof performance and financial security guaranteed. Make sure you visit fortis.us.com. All right, Jed, bring her on home for us. Final thoughts, final matchups to keep an eye on here.
Yeah, when you look at Duquesne's defense, you just hit on something, Wes. The 60 or 70-yard touchdowns, that's how you put these teams away, the big plays. Like, when I think of CJ last year with the 80-plus yard run against Towson,
yep.
One of the things this is incumbent upon the receivers to do. If you want to put them away early, you block downfield. Okay, big plays are downstream from big blocks on the perimeter, right, Owen? So the wideouts need to handle their business on the perimeter. I mean, look at the blocking on that 80-some-yard touchdown CJ had last year against Towson.
Yeah, Bryce Ford Wheaton took out 2 guys on that play.
But defensively, that's what has to happen for these types of big plays to help put them away. But Duquesne defensively, and this is where it gets a little more interesting. They have a D coordinator, Mike Craig. He took over. He was an assistant. Took over last year for a long-time assistant. Dave Opfar up there was their coordinator for over a decade, a dozen years or so. And the biggest thing was a year ago they found themselves as a defense in transition. They went from a long time, an even front scheme, more of a 4-2-5 scheme, to an odd front. And from a personnel standpoint, that's never easy. Of course, it's a little easier in the age of the portal, so you can recruit your personnel to fit the types of schemes, because even fronts and odd fronts are 2 different animals. Up front, even on the second level, is what you're trying to do. But when you look at some of the things that they have succeeded in doing, you can already see a leap that they took this offseason. They struggled in that transition to some extent last year. I mean, first of all, I think as a team at large, they struggled last year. They were 4-7 last season, which is uncharacteristic for them. That was a year that was marred by, they had a lot of injuries and they had a lot of close losses. And they were putting in a new defense and installing an entirely new scheme. Well, they started last week against Edinburgh. Now, Edinburgh is overmatched against them like they're overmatched against us. But they took care of their business. How did they do it? One of the ways they did it, they forced 5 turnovers. They forced 4 turnovers, guys, in the first quarter against Edinburgh. You want to put these guys away? Imagine with the gun sounds, 15 minutes into the game, we forced 4 turnovers. What do you think the score's going to be? And that's kind of what they did. Exactly. So they've got some guys that they've got a pass rusher that we got to look out for and handle him. He's 6'2", 255. He's strong off the edge. Kevin Kurzinger, that's a kid that he used to be a running back. That speaks to his athleticism. He had a physicality to him in the run game, but a couple of years ago he moved to linebacker, and now he finds himself as an edge player. They have a corner in Aiden Garnes. He had a pick 6, 3rd or 4th play of the game last week. Read it, made a very skilled pick that was thrown behind him, took it to the house to give them the early lead. He's a physical kid that plays the ball well. He plays above his 165 pounds. He's not a real big kid from Philly, but he plays above that size. Another kid named Ty Howard. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds. He's going to be a factor potentially as a second level threat in the pass rush. So these are all guys. Shane Stump, transfer from Youngstown State. He's played a lot of college football. These are guys that have played a lot of football. They've been through the battles with them. Antonio Epps, their free safety. You're going to have to account for him. They have a preseason all-conference D tackle in A.J. Ackerman. That's their 310-pound guy. So can Zach Frazier and the guards handle their business on the interior? But that's one of the things that I look at. First of all, we went from last week, Owen, an even front defense with Manny Diaz, to this week an odd front defense against Duquesne, which is going to serve us well because you're going to see a lot of odd front schemes defensively once we get into Big 12 play. And again, next week back into more of the even type stuff. But this is a group that Sometimes they'll play games on third down. It's that kind of tinkering where they'll stand 11 guys with a handful of them hovering around the line of scrimmage defensively along the defensive line with nobody with their hand in the dirt, 11 guys standing up. They'll play some of those games so you don't know what gap they're trying to get a beat on. They like to bring pressure. They like to, obviously, typical stuff. They'll stunt and blitz behind it, but a lot of 5- and 6-man pressures. They'll throw some zero at you. Again, I think that was a matchup thing against Edinburgh more than it will be against us. And another thing, they'll test us up front in the sense that they like to stem a lot. And what I mean by that, Wes, is, Owen, you know what I'm talking about. They move pre-snap along the defensive line. So you might see a guy as an outside shade. Next thing you know, they kick their front. He's an inside shade. Now, first of all, that tests your communication on the offensive line. But second of all, you got to make sure that you're not false starting. I mean, that kind of movement, when we think back to what ended up happening with that bad snap at the end of the Oklahoma game out in Norman in 2020, that was the byproduct of Oklahoma stemming so much before it. Now, they were giving a cadence with it, go, and that made Zach snap the ball, hold over an animal. But it tests you as an offensive line when a team shows that much pre-snap movement. So not only is it an odd front configuration that we haven't seen, we'll see it later, so it's good snaps for us. But in addition to that, it's a lot of pre-snap movement. So we're going to be tested with that too.
Well, there we go. I tell you what, it's good. Listen, you want to put them away early, but you also want to have some boxes that you can check in the process, right? Mentally, physically, like you mentioned, from a preparation standpoint, in terms of being prepared for these guys and knowing what they're going to present and how you counter it and limiting procedure.
We almost blocked the punt last week. We came a whisker away from blocking the first punt of the second half last week. Can we finish that job against these guys? Can you make a big play on special teams? Can you return a kick? Can you block a kick? So in transition units, you have an opportunity because, again, oftentimes they talk about depth being the issue, the biggest difference between Power 5 football and FCS football because the scholarship numbers. Well, that impacts your transition units, which are populated by reserves as much as anywhere, right? There's a lot of backups coupled with some starters sprinkled in there. But if you can make a play against their special teams units, again, we're trying to stick to a script to get us ahead early, to get us comfortable early, and then kind of have our way with who we sub in and sub out. Special teams, not to interrupt, but special teams could play a role with that as well. Who's going to be the guy that makes the big play in the return game? We haven't seen that since Moby Dick was a guppy. Maybe this is the day.
Well, Jed, we haven't seen that since 2 years ago when Winston Wright took the opening kickoff back to the house against Long Island. And it was kind of like, all right, well, that's how you start a game when you're playing a lesser opponent. Right. And 10 seconds into the game, you're up 7-0. That's how you get Great them point. Thinking, oh, crap, this is going to be a long day. Here we go. Yeah, something like that would absolutely go a long way to putting these guys away. All right, gentlemen, we've had pretty good fortune here with our connections. Couple little lags for Jed, but nothing crazy. So let's get out of here before something bad happens. Any final thoughts? Any final word here? Speak now or hold your peace till next week.
I wonder if you haven't, tell me, but if you haven't seen Phil hit Phil Steele for the week.
That's right. Yeah, make sure you're checking out our previous episode, ITG 81. Great stuff on our second annual Phil Thursday. We've got some big things planned for you guys in terms of merchandise. We are now over 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thanks to everybody that has joined us there, and Skylar putting together the great production and everything that's taken us to the next level. So we got a bunch going on for you guys behind the scenes as well, too, that we're kind of working on and moving and shaking to bring you a better product and more things as well, too. ITGfootball.com, In the Gun Podcast, and all your different social media channels. And as always, well, hold on, Jed, did you have a final thought first before I was going to
ask Owen, close us out. You mentioned the Eastern Washington game. We beat them 52-3, give or take. I need to look it up and make sure. What do you remember most about that game? You only play so many games, right? Now, that wasn't the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. That wasn't the comeback against Louisville. It wasn't the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma. But it was one of a very short list of college football games you got to play. So what do you, even as a guy who didn't play a whole lot in the game because you guys got out early, give the listeners and the viewers some perspective of how excited you still were to step on the field in front of the crowd to take live reps against an opponent that everybody said, they're not that excited. They're not. What do you remember about it? Just hit us with that.
I remember they had this linebacker that played for him he was like 5'2", but he absolutely brought the wood. And I wish I remembered his name, but he was a hell of a player. And my story is a little bit different than everybody else's because I started at D3, and I played with a lot of really great football players that were all shapes and sizes. That maybe if it had been a little bit taller, a little bit bigger, a little bit faster, or have a little more agility, or could throw it farther, would be playing. Just the opportunity that I had gotten. But there's nothing like a game day because you're sick and tired of hitting your buddies all week. Yeah. In the old days where you hit in practice, and it was time to showcase what you had. And there's nothing better than singing Country Roads at the end of a ball game.
Yeah, buddy.
Well
Owen, it was 52-3. Good call there by you, Jed.
Okay.
The historian Jedgar Allan Poe had it once again. Owen Schmidt had 17 yards and a touchdown on the ground, and 36 yards through the air. So handful of touches there for Big O. Caught a couple passes, 19-yard reception there, 7-yard touchdown run for Big O in that one as well too. So
Big O was that
a touchdown at Mountaineer Field, baby.
Were those catches at fullback or at tight end? You remember?
Oh, they might have been that was Eastern Washington.
Running Ram then, right? Or were you running Ram? I don't think Ram came till 2007, did it?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't really. I really evolved to tight end senior year. That's when they really had me start kind of doing the sniffer stuff. Put me at tight end, put me in a little bit of like slot kind of
11 personnel with you on the field.
Yeah. Honestly, I can't remember if it was at tight end. It probably possibly could have been. I know I did run, like they had me doing this wheel play for a while from the tight end from Ram formation, but I can't honestly remember it. I have to go watch back the film, watch the tape, Jed. I mean,
watch the tape.
Unlike you, I can't remember all the plays. It's honestly fantastic and beautiful, your mind, because I wish I could be like that.
Old Sean McVay over here, I tell you.
Man, the coach, you always have those coach. Marty Morningwig probably was one of the guys who was like, hey, he'd be talking to Coach Reed, or he'd be talking to some player. Yeah, you remember, 8 years ago when we were playing Dallas, and
it was third quarter, and it was.
Did you hear that? He just mentions Coach Reed. We're talking Super Bowl champion Andy Reid. But continue. That's
Coach Reed.
Coach
yeah,
Reed.
No, I mean, it's just right. Like those guys just remember every play. They remember the formations. Yeah, this is what I called, and then I was like, I changed it up, called the Z drag, and whatever. You know what I mean? It's just like, and my mind is just like, man, I just want to know what the next play is so I don't mess it up, and I don't
mess up the next one.
Hey, Owen, here's the secrets are coming out now. Who was your go-to guy? Who did you have to cheat and ask? Was it?
Hey, listen, I was a student of the game. I really studied the playbook, and I was a guy. I was a flashcard. I would pull out flash because listen, we played with Coach Rod. Man, we had 12 formations, maybe 12 plays, legit. Yeah.
Indeed,
legit. Yeah. And then you go to a legit West Coast offense with Mike Holmgren at the helm, and I'm telling you, dude, my head like blew apart because you're looking for tags, but you really had to know the formations and who was all on the field because a tag might not be the same thing on the same play. So I really had to study hard, and flashcards was a big deal for me. I legit was like, I mean, every second of the day, man. I had a whiteboard in my apartment, and I studied hella film. I was always watching film, but I was a student of the game. But if I did need help,
who were you asking?
If I did need help, usually it was scripted, and I asked the coach before I went in.
Smart. You say I remember everything. I don't remember everything. Okay, but I promise you, I remember the picks. I remember the picks.
Well, I mean, you're gonna remember
somebody this morning asked me. This morning, Jet, what's the most interceptions you ever had in a game before the sentence was out of their mouth? 5 against Jeff Castile, Shepherd Rams in 1992. We got beat 23-20. And I fumbled. I had 6 turnovers in one game against Castile. That bastard, I'm still trying to get him back.
You know what's crazy? Talking about that, football is a beautiful game because it allows you to have short-term memory loss.
Yeah,
it is in your benefit to forget the last play and move on.
It forces you to. Yeah,
and you have to.
Yeah. Well said.
Absolutely do.
Remember the bad ones.
Absolutely do.
Well,
I was going to say, hopefully it'll be Duquesne stewing on the bad ones this Saturday night at Milan Pushkar Stadium.
We got to take care of this.
6:00.
This Pittsburgh team that won an Orange Bowl, we got to take care of, because right after that we play a Pittsburgh team. It's never won an Orange Bowl. So
that's right. That's exactly right. And that Pittsburgh team that's never won an Orange Bowl plays Cincinnati on Saturday night. So let's hope the Bearcats bring out the gloves and give Pitt all they can handle and maybe beat them up a little bit for us. Hey, I wouldn't hate it if that one went into overtime, maybe 7 overtimes between Cincinnati and Pitt. I'll allow it. I'm not against it on Saturday night there at Acrisure Stadium. But it will be the Mountaineers and the Dukes, 6 p.m. once again Saturday night. Family Day at Mountaineer Field. Hopefully one where all the families will be stress-free. Listen, I'm taking my daughter, all right, who's almost 2 years old. Just the 2 of us are going. So, Mountaineers, my daughter really does not need to see me dropping F-bombs and pulling my hair out and stressing over a game against a 1AA opponent, all right? So let's take care of business. Let's get this, and maybe even I could get little Olivia out of there a little early to get home for bedtime. Yes. Let's get some feel good before, obviously, that big one, September 16th, against those non-Orange Bowl winning athletic university department from Pittsburgh. That'll do it for us on this edition of ITG. Been a good week, a full week, 20 for your palate there to get you ready for the Dukes. Once again, make sure you're checking out Phil Thursday with Phil Steele. And as always, the last thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. For the Signal Caller Jed Drenning and the Runaway Beer Truck Owen Schmidt and our producer Skylar as well too, I'm Wesley Euler. Thanks for listening, everybody. Enjoy the game, and we'll talk to you next week. You've been In the Gun.